Good day, fish tankers. What is the minimum fish tank size or aquarium size for you pick whatever species of fish? That's a question that's forever being asked. And also what you can do a quick Google search and go with a consensus. You can't go too far wrong there, but there's often a disagreement on what is a minimum tank size for a certain fish. So how do you determine the tank size that a fish needs? If that's something you're interested in, then stick around. Now, the first consideration that we need to determine how big a tank a fish needs is just the obvious, the actual space. Now, what I always say is the fish must be able to turn around in the tank without bending its body. Now, many fish like this hyphen pangasius shark that you see there, they can turn around by bending their body, but that you don't want them to have to do that. So a good rule of thumb, if you take the length of a fish, let's say for instance a fish like an Oscar, generally they can get about 12 inches, they can get more than that, but that measurement takes a fish from the tip of its nose to the base of its tail, excluding the tail fin. So if you have a fish that is 30 centimeters long, you're going to need a tank that's at least 1.5 times that from back to front. So a tank is going to have to be 45 centimeters deep, or sometimes we say wide, but the measurement from the back of a tank to the front of a tank to enable the fish to turn. So if you have very long fish like monster fish like arowana, you're going to need a tank that's quite deep from front to back, so to enable the fish to turn. Even though it bends its body, it mustn't feel constrained. It must be able to turn around in the tank if it were to turn in a straight line, which obviously it doesn't do mostly, but that's one thing. And then it must be able to comfortably swim around. Then we have fish that are high rather than long, meaning from the bottom of a anal fin to the top of a dorsal fin. Fish like these angels need high tanks, at least 16 inches in their terms. And when we get to these discus, you need a tank that's about 24 inches or 60 centimeter high. So they may not move very fast, but they are fish that require deeper water. So you need a tank that will give them exactly that. So that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. The space must be big enough for the fish to move around in. Then the second thing is water quality. Will you be able to maintain optimum water quality with that fish in that size tank? For instance, in my student days, I had 2 Oscars, and those days, that's what we did because we didn't know better, didn't have better information. 2 Oscars, they usually gave you a 4-foot 55-gallon tank, and that tank was a bit more than 55 gallons because it was high. It was probably more like a 75-gallon tank. And those 2 big Oscars lived in that tank for many years. Would I recommend it? Definitely not. Why not? Because despite the fact that I had a big filters connected on that tank, it did necessitate me doing about 70% water changes twice a week to maintain water quality. Now, your average fish keeper is not going to do that. So those fish really should have been in a 125-gallon, a 5-foot tank at least. And that was what I would do if I do that now. So some fish are messy. Goldfish is a good example, and they need bigger aquariums. A goldfish don't need a huge amounts of space, even though they are big, but they sort of wobble around the tank. They're not fast swimmers, but they are messy. So you have to be able to maintain that water quality. For that, you need sizable volume. So that's another consideration. Can you maintain water quality with that specific fish? Then the third one is you've got to consider the swimming habits of the fish. Now, certain fish, like once again, pangasius cats or reticent sharks, they swim up and down and they get big, so they really need huge aquaria, not really suitable for the average aquarist. But certain small fish, for instance, zebra danios and neon tetras, I could put 6 neon tetras and maybe 6 zebra danios in a 5-gallon 20-liter tank, and I might be able to maintain water quality, but it's not and they are able to easily turn around, but it's not going to work because they're fast swimming fish. They're up and down all the time, moving down the length of a tank. So even though the space enables them to turn around comfortably and you might be able to maintain good water quality still, it's not going to work out because the space is just too small. You're going to have to put them in at least a 10-gallon tank. Maybe a 15-gallon, a 2-foot tank is better because they're small fish, but they're fast-moving fish. And if you put them in too small a space, I did once put a few neon tetras in a 5-gallon tank, and the peaceful fish suddenly turned aggressive, started fighting with each other. So I put them back in a bigger tank. The experiment was done. But if a fish feel cramped, they start dashing up and down the glass, or they start becoming aggressive when they are not even aggressive fish. So you've got to take the swimming habits into account. An Oscar, for example, is a huge bioload, but so it needs a big tank and it's big fish. It needs room, but it doesn't need as big a tank size, for example, something that's fast swimming and up and down, like a tinfoil barb might need to have. So look at the swimming habits of a fish. Some fish are fast swimming fish and others are not. Then you've got to look at the social structure of a fish. Now certain fish are small and they can go in smaller aquaria, but they like to be in big groups. For instance, a corridoras, those little catfish, they're not huge fish, and you can maybe put 1 or 2 in a 5-gallon tank and it might work out. But the thing is, they like to be in big groups of at least 6 or 8 or more. So they really need a bigger tank than that because it needs to support a group of them. So that's another thing. So there's all kinds of debates raging on in tank sizes. For instance, bettas, or Siamese fighters as we like to call them in South Africa. Now the general rule of thumb would be, people would say a 5-gallon tank is a minimum size for them. I would tend to agree, but when you get Flu Velva's got a very nice sort of betta tank that's only, I think, 2 gallons, and it's got filtration and a heater, slow moving filter. Can you keep a betta in a tank like that? Because it's made for bettas, and you can't trust manufacturers with their pictures on the boxes, because that's a big bugbear of mine. Small tanks with goldfish on the picture on the box. But could you theoretically do that? I've kept bettas in 3-gallon tanks and they were fine, but I would say that depends on the individual fish because they've got different sort of characteristics. I found that short fin plakat bettas are much more active, so I wouldn't put them in anything less than a 5-gallon tank. But one year there's a plakat betta here to my right, and that's about I think it's a 7 or 8-gallon cube, and that's fine for him. I wouldn't put that betta that's very active in a 3-gallon or in a 2-gallon tank. But then I've also had long fin bettas that were very passive because of those long fins. They sit on the leaf most of the day, get active when they're fed, and then they'll just sit in one corner of a tank to the next corner of a tank and sort of just slowly swim through the leaves, nipping here and there. You can clearly see they're much less active. Now, a fish like that will be fine in a Fluval tank or in a 3-gallon tank. You'll be able to do that, because you will be able to maintain water quality, and it's not a fast moving fish. I won't say it's ideal, but a slow moving long fin, one of those passive bettas, will be fine there. However, let's say they were not fish that like to be on their own and they wanted to be in a group of 4 or 5, then you won't be able to keep them in a 5-gallon tank, because you can't accommodate a group like that while still maintaining water quality and having the fish being comfortable with each other. And always remember, err on the side of caution. Usually the tank sizes that are recommended as a minimum. Sometimes you can go a bit less, but it's said there for a reason. From my experience working in a shop, you know, for beginners, you've got to err on the side of caution of advice that you give them, because if you're going to tell them 5 gallons is a minimum tank size, they might try 3 gallons if they're short on cash. So you always tell them a little bit more than that is absolutely necessary. But those are the factors that you have to keep in mind when determining the appropriate tank size or aquarium size for a particular fish. Well guys, I hope that's been of help to you. Please always remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for those who did. And until I see you again, take good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.